Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show. Today is Thursday, Thankful Thursday, and I guess I'm thankful that we still have time, I guess you could say. I'm thankful for everybody's patience as well, because I know this has gone on longer than we've all projected. But I want you guys to know that I'm working right now on the type of project management hit listing that can at least begin clarity around the conversations of what is left to do. Does that make sense? Because while I've been working on all the content side, I realized that different than our pre-Genesis hit list, it's like our work is very, very siloed to the point that we're not even coordinating. And I realized I do need to coordinate with my phenomenal front-end development and fellow gaffer of the circus. So anyways, yeah, that's what's going on. Can you guys hear me? Do I have an audio check here in general chat? All right, fantastic. Okay, well, legitimately also, I'm going to begin rearranging this room to be a more effective set for actually the Learn Pyre content. So we're probably going to suspend the PYRESWAP show, at least in the sense that you understand it. We'll still do it once a week. I'm thinking Tuesday. I'm going to make that announcement tomorrow of what day it is. It'll be Tuesday at the normal time, and I'll probably be in front of a green screen, and it'll probably just be a general, will emote fit, Dr. Mike? I'll tell you this, the set will be like the average thing. I might have the background image ready for it too, but it will literally be like a fucking wizard study. We'll get that going at least. The set will be like a wizard study, so I can at least make that background for you guys. And it'll just be a once a week development update, because all you guys care about now is a development update, right? And it's not even a development on the Web3 side. It's a development for our marketing funnel site, right? Jerry, do you want me to do the hat? I can make the next Tuesday show. I will do it fully in the costume. I might have the complete costume by Tuesday. So if you would like me to debut the full costume on Tuesday, I'm willing to do it. That's just a consolation for the fact that this is taking this fucking long. Does that make sense? But yeah, I just want to continue insisting that I'm fully committed to actually finishing. And I wanted to say this as well, and I guess I'll say today. As I'm working on design, like I'm working on design right now, I had to interrupt design to come to the stream. And I realized that like the stuff that I really get serious about designing, that stuff always gets built, to be clear. Like that stuff is always the stuff that like really works out well. Does that make sense? So like I want you guys to understand that I've designed so many random things, from like shower thoughts, or like I woke up in the middle of a fucking dream and like I fucking wrote down a notebook paper. Do you guys remember I told you like I designed a dApp that kills meme coins? Like that was literally like waking up in the middle of the night and then like writing it down. But that's like one notebook paper. Does that make sense? That's like one piece of notebook paper. I gave myself the gist of how it works. But yeah, you get what I'm saying, Jerry, because it's inflammation followed by decompression or whatever. Exactly. So it changes the way your synapses touch each other. It pushes your brain in on itself. It compresses your brain, makes you think differently. Anyways, the point being is, the one that kills meme coins is not like a serious project, because it was literally like I woke up, wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then it's done. Does that make sense? I can still say it's designed, because if I needed to build a blueprint from that notebook paper, I could spend the hours needed to really design it long form that I could give it to a dev. But I want you guys to understand, I know that one as well, yeah. You get that mental clarity. You get the mental clarity from the workout. By the way, Javery, I don't know if you're into cold showers, but at least my coach / consultant tells me you should never do a cold shower after the gym, because you do need your body to actually go through inflammation. So if you do the cold showers, you should not do it after working out. You should do it like maybe for waking up, but not working out. Anyways, that's a tangent. Anyways, I want you guys to know. Well, Javery, what I use is I have a frozen migraine wrap. It's like a gel fucking hat. It's like a gel beanie kind of, but kind of like a sleeve. And what I do is I have it in the freezer, and then what I do is I just put it over my head, because you lose most of your heat through your head anyway, or somebody says that, right? And therefore, when you have this gigantic cold, like it's kind of made by I think it's made by gelatin inside or something like that, some type of semi-frozen thing. It basically gets you probably about half of the it probably gets you half of what you would get from a cold plunge. Does that make sense? So if you wear that for like a minute straight, it'll definitely change the way you feel and think. Does that make sense? I do that sometimes for my own motivation. Yeah, or my own wake-up routine. Not every day, but I do it, yeah. Yeah, yeah, and it costs like $20. Yeah, you can get one on Amazon. I think it's called if it's a migraine cold wrap. Yeah. Leslie, you're correct. You're correct. But the point being here is that even though I haven't demoed or debuted enough, starting next week, I'm going to show you guys a little bit more of the project management and a little bit more of actual visual deliverables. Does that make sense? Whether it's just storybook art or whether it's maybe parts of the blueprinting or parts of the hit list, I'll just make that a development update. Does that make sense? Because we're going to just, I'm not going to kill the stream while I'm doing interviews, but I'm just going to make it a weekly stream because I'm talking to the same 15 people, right? It's a revolving door of 15 people, right? Maybe there's another dozen on Twitter, but it's probably still the same guys, right? So if they're willing to tune in regularly, they're willing to tune in on Tuesday. Me doing this to you guys, while it just gives you that very frequent assurance that I didn't spontaneously die, I think that I could reduce the frequency I'm doing it. We're going to be doing plenty of video work making Learn Pyre, so we don't need to overheat this camera. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Cameras actually work better by keeping them cool as well. Did you guys know that? Yeah, Javery, I agree. By the way, I'll give you guys a little bit of lore sneak peek if you want right now. Not related to Learn Pyre, but I will say it because I know you guys are Toonport fans. No, they will start when it's public because I'm actually in my outreach process, Alessio, which is a process. As you're aware, we have 800 to 900 to 1,000 emails, right? For interviewers, YouTubers, and podcasters, right? Are you aware of this resource? Okay. So legitimately, the way that I have now, and I'm systemizing this based on instructions. So not like a guy in Web3 told me, but like a guy who writes marketing books told me. Does that make sense? He says when you do outreach to people who can promote you to their following, you should not start it off transactionally. He says rather, you should give them quality feedback on something they've done recently. Does that make sense? So whatever their latest interview is, the first week of interviews is me actually probably watching some of their fucking latest things. And I will give clear feedback. Does that make sense? That would actually be valuable to them. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And the point of it is to start a correspondence with them, right? If they were if as soon as we have any type of reply, first of all, I'm already starting off. Yeah, exactly. Give them valuables. Well, not even compliments, literally just I like this, but then also I think here you could have done this. Does that make sense? Right? An actual actionable ideas. Does that make sense? Not you should do an interview with Elon Musk. That's not an idea. You know what I mean? But actual actionable. But you get what I'm saying? Yeah, you get what I'm saying. Exactly. So you get. Well done. You're right. I do remember that term now. But yeah, literally give them actual feedback with clear instructions on something valuable or anything like that, and that starts a conversation where I can then get their feedback on one of my latest video projects. Does that make sense? And do you know what I begin getting their feedback on? And by the way, I want you to understand that I'm trying to have 40 of these conversations every day. Does that make sense? Yeah, so don't think that I'm waiting for this to happen. I'm doing this in bulk, but it also allows me to effectively use my time in a way that will definitely get us lots of exposure, and it'll get us ambassadors. No offense, Alessio, not that I don't believe in your ability to single-handedly ambassador for all of us, but the point of it is, Javery, is I tell them hey, if they respond to my feedback in a positive way, I'm gonna be hey, I'm not gonna address that, but I'll be hey, do you guys know what jester's privilege is? All right, I'm gonna stop tangenting. I'm gonna say, hey, could you give me feedback on my video project? And then I'll literally just link them to Learn Pyre. Does that make sense? Because if I watch their video and I literally respond to them hey, this guy definitely watched my video, they're definitely gonna watch my video. Does that make sense? And my video is also high production and scripted and edited to hook and maintain attention. Video 1 of Learn Pyre is the emotional gut punch story with me learning about my dad dying. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I'm not just bringing them to the landing page of Learn Pyre. Because, Javery, guess what's happening? These fucking YouTubers are now effectively prompted to begin being the first pioneers down the funnel. Does that make sense? So first of all, this is great because I get early stage feedback on from people who actually make videos on what they like and don't like about going through. But at the same time, what am I doing? I'm actually converting them. Exactly, Jayri. I'm slowly beginning them to sell them on Pyre too. I'm beginning to early convert them. Because Jayri, you understand some of these guys we have to pay money to for their interview. But at the same time, they might not give a fuck about getting paid. They might be excited about the opportunity to interview a guy who's not launching a meme coin. Does that make sense? Right? Like, depending where their heads are at. Because I have talked to a few of them, and like, the YouTubers are not always thrilled about what they end up covering again and again and again. And they don't like the fact that they promote projects and those projects fucking die. Does that make sense? Well, some of them, you know, some of them don't care, but like some of them. Right, exactly, Jayri, exactly. So the point being here is that these guys, as I'm getting early feedback, after the feedback, it's like, oh, maybe we should do an interview. Does that make sense? But also, their interview, I tell them, hey, I already scripted the whole thing, so you don't gotta fucking even worry about what you wanna ask me. I'm literally I have a scripted 3-story format. Have I told you guys that? It's called a knife twister opening. Do you guys remember this? The Howard Beale the Howard Beale allegory from Network. Do you guys remember this? So I'm already getting this YouTuber who's gonna interview me pre-sold on the project. Alessio, I'll tell you this. It's the same concept. It's a very emotive and the acronym here. I'll give you the acronym, Alessio. I know you guys love a good acronym. ATPO. Articulate the public outrage. Does that make sense? Articulate the public outrage. So whatever everybody in crypto is fed up with, does that make sense? Like, that's the stuff that I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to talk about, not about like getting people's drool to pull up for this interview. I want to actually talk about the stuff that they fucking hate about crypto. Does that make sense? Yeah, like how come we just keep seeing this again and again? Do you know that out of 1.7 million meme coins, only 100 of them have ever lasted longer than 2 weeks? You know what I mean? Like, that's literally it. Like, that's like the odds of success here are like the lowest it's ever been, right? At the highest rate of adoption, we also have the highest rate of idiocy. Does that make sense? Yesterday, by the way, during the roundtable, somebody said, or I think they said it to me, that like what YouTube does to Hollywood, Pyre does to Wall Street, which was just an amazing fucking conceptual allegory. Does that make sense? About giving the powers of banking to the layman, right? Democratizing it. Does that make sense? So the point being is that we don't talk about active staking. We don't talk about the IWV. We literally just... Who said that, Alessio? I'm going to credit you when we get the peg. How about that? I'm going to say you're the one that gave me the idea when we get the peg. Okay? Jose Maria, okay. Escriva says that when you use yourself as an example, you lack the virtue of modesty. Or you lack the virtue of humility. Yeah, so, yeah, I hope that explains what I'm saying. Anyways, yeah. So, literally every single thing, Alessio, would you agree that, like, the highest paid athletes in the world, like, every motion is rehearsed and practiced? Every motion is, like, thought about ahead of time? Do you guys know what I mean? Yeah. So the point being here is that our entire marketing process is doing the exact same way. Like, there's no gray areas. There's no guesswork. Every single conversation and interaction, whether it's us talking to a YouTuber, what we're sending to them. Thank you, Alessio. I know you'd appreciate that. But I'm not joking as well. Yeah, I really do mean it. Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo of marketing. Or Messi, or Pele, times 3. At least in Web 3. CJ, yeah, I mean, he might die of old age. Yeah, but at the same time, like, you still have that practiced in. Yeah, LeBron still practices way more than everybody else. He also has the most practice log since he's 65 years old. You know what I mean? Since LeBron is the only guy who's, getting paid 8 figures in the NBA while also receiving Social Security, he's clearly... I'm kidding. But yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, like every single detail has done that. Yeah. You're not wrong, CJ. Yeah, you're not wrong. The good news is, CJ, is that this is not my first rodeo. I did spend 2024 doing a few dozen Twitter spaces and interviews. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah. Right? So it's like, I'm not completely dumb on talking about this, right? I'm not completely fucking bad, but I do know that the way that I talked about it in the past is the wrong fucking thing. What you want to do is you want to, and this is a quote from Donald Miller. The more you talk about a customer's problem, or the more you talk about your avatar's pain point, the bigger the story gap you open in their mind. And do you guys know what a story gap is? You guys are, bless you all for your tenacity. And by the way, bless you guys for being like not crybabies on a day where Bitcoin is like 45K or whatever. Right? It was 45K. I'm just fucking trying to, yeah, I'm just trying to spook people. Yep, okay. Yeah, anyways, I'm literally being a fucking asshole at this point. Yeah, like I'm just, okay. Anyways, yeah. But the point being is, bravo for your tenacity and persistence. Okay, a story gap, yeah. So a story gap, Alessio, is any type of unresolved sequence of events that is thought of as a storyline in a human brain. Does that make sense? Do you guys remember when I would like start telling stories on the show and then like tell the producer to cut it like right when it was right when like something was about to happen, like kind of a cliffhanger idea? I'm not saying that all story gaps are cliffhangers, but a cliffhanger is an example of a story gap. Does that make sense? Like it's like the annoyance that you don't know what happens next is what keeps you fucking hooked. Does that make sense? It's like, it's not a good feeling. It's like a bit of irritation that you're like, okay, well, tell me what happens next. Or if you ever hear somebody drawing a story out and you're like, come on, right? It's because they actually did hook you with the story gap, but now they're giving you like details you don't care about. You're looking for like this next pertinent piece of information. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like this has happened to all of you, by the way. Oh, is it back? Okay, did I have a cut? Did I cut? Okay, Alessio, did you hear all of what I said? Okay, half it. Okay, so a story gap is any type of unresolved sequence of events in a human brain's idea of a storyline. Like any type of conclusion that's not being shown. Does that make sense? It's kind of like an ache for the conclusion. It's like this weird subconscious want that like I need to know what happened next. Does that make sense? It's the need to know what happened next, right? And it's a hook. It's a hooking concept. Does that make sense? Because it's being driven by curiosity. Like their curiosity, yeah, exactly, yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course. That's how you have to write it. By the way, a cliffhanger is a type of story gap, but not all story gaps are cliffhangers. Some story gaps are like literally, if I was just telling, okay, when fucking Janice McAfee launched the scammy meme coin, and then I had to like call the show short so I could go deal with it. You guys were probably all waiting on Monday to hear about what the fuck was the conclusion, and then it was like bad. Do you guys know what I mean? Like it was like, what the fuck is going on with 5 and the whole John McAfee thing, right? Like it's like, what? Yeah, like I do want to know how that concluded because it could in fact affect the future, right? And it's like one of those things that you just need to know, right? And also, this is why you guys ask when. Does that make sense? When? Because there's a story gap in your mind based on the fact that like you had an idea of the sequence of events for this. Does that make sense? So the reason investors ask when is because of an unresolved story gap that is present in their brain. Does that make sense to you guys? And that's in the story where they are the protagonist, where you are the protagonist. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying? So the point being is, the more you enunciate, articulate, and talk about a customer's problem or a pain point, yes, CJ, and that's actually very relevant to banking, by the way. So yeah, more on that way later. But anyways, yeah, so the point being is that the more that I go on the interview, instead of me talking, so what we did is we invented the incantation witch vault. People don't give a fuck about that until they understand what it does for them. Does that make sense? So it makes more sense for me to literally start off by talking about the stuff that bothers them. Does that make sense? Why it bothered me too, what I did about it, why you should take a risk that I know what I'm talking about, and then what exactly did I do that fucking addresses the thing that I was talking about in the first place. Does that make sense? That's how you get people kind of slowly rolling towards you. Does that make sense? And it's from a bunch of people slowly rolling towards you that you create the net effect of a stampede. Does that make sense? Because once that other people realize that other people are doing it, they now get competitive. So you have that exponent, right, of buy pressure. Do you guys get what I'm saying? This is why I always say that I just need a few hundred people to show up with $5, right? I don't talk about people coming in with 100 grand because that's a pump and dump. Like one guy with 100 grand is a pump and dump. But if you have 1,000 people coming in with $5 and it's all happening at the same time, people will immediately start throwing in more than $5. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And it's a stochastic process. It's a pot being boiled by a bunch of small bubbles, not somebody just like throwing a piece of lava into a cooking pot. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Allegorically. Well, yeah, and then CJ, he can keep that dry powder on hand when he feels the FOMO. Does that make sense? Because by the way, all of you guys still have extra money. Does that make sense? Right? Like, and that's okay. And that's okay. Because I'm not asking for anybody to like invest their blood in this besides me. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Only my health and livelihood should be at risk here. But that also is necessary to make sure that I finish the job, right? Anyways, yeah, don't be scared of burning your ships, as it were. But yeah, story gap. That's literally the concept. Like, you just talk about the pain point and their problem. So everything that I do on the YouTube interview, I don't even fucking talk that much about what PYRESWAP actually does. I give them like a broad idea, like what YouTube did to Hollywood, Pyre does to Wall Street. Does that make sense? Like, that's something that people understand outside of America too, right? Hollywood and Wall Street are like conceptual locations that, well, they are physical too, but you get what I'm saying. Like, people outside of the US know what those locations kind of refer to as far as industry. I don't even know what I would call their locuses. Okay, industry regions of significance. But yeah, no, the point being is that like you become very, very specific about their problem and then you be vague about the solution. Does that make sense? Before, I was just being very, very specific about the solution and like not talking about their problem, right? And most of the time, people in Web3 don't know their customer or what their problem is or what they can solve. Hardware wallets do. Does that make sense? Hardware wallets do. When people advertise newsletters, they also talk about like, don't be left in the dark. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, they do market better than the products themselves. You're not wrong, CJ. You're not wrong. Yeah. But that also is kind of like that is a different like genre of art. Does that make sense? Yeah, like it did. I wouldn't say that video games killed movies because then movies became based on video games, right? And you have like the Halo TV series. The Super Mario movie was a fucking nominee for, was it the Grant, I think, was it Golden Globes or Oscars? Sorry. Okay, I thought producer might know. I'm kidding. Anyways, yeah. But you get what I'm saying? Oh, there was this series called Secret Level, which was just like a bunch of short videos that were like in the video game world on a streaming service like 2 months ago. Anyways, point being is, you be very, very vague about what the solution is, and you just make it sound kind of all-encompassing. They have to learn the specifics by stepping towards you, because that lines up with human psychology. If something is fuzzy in the distance, you have to walk towards it to see what it is. Does that make sense? If something's in the distance to you and you're immediately faced with specifics of it, it doesn't make any sense to your actual animal experience as a Homo sapien. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here, or is this techno babble? Do you guys understand me? You do? Thank you, CJ. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have a hawk eye, right, where we can literally just like zoom in and out by dilating our pupils consciously. We do not have that ability. At least I don't. Yeah. And yeah, they have it's not a pupil, it's their fucking, some other part of their anatomy. Yeah, we do not have like a fucking zoom in vision on our eyes. We have to actually physically move to something. So therefore, in order for people to actually walk towards us, CJ, we have to kind of create this, I don't want to say psychosomatic or subconscious, but we have to create the surrogate. I like that was 3 words that all at least began with the S phonetic. We have to create the surrogate of the idea of stepping towards something to go check it out. Does that make sense? As opposed to literally teleporting them into the middle of FDR, into the middle of Williamsburg, and then expect them to appreciate New York City. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Anyways, yeah. I'm going to try. Anyways, yeah, this is the last PYRESWAP show in this format for at least a while. We're going to pivot it to a development update weekly. I think Tuesday's a day. Yeah, Tuesday. Do you have any problem with Tuesday? Okay, Tuesday seems like a good day because that way it's like I still have other, you know what I mean? We fucking shift. Yeah, pivoting is for cowards. Yeah, pivoting are for people who lack commitment. Yeah. Pivot sounds like something that's undoable. Yeah. Yeah, we don't pivot here. We fucking jump ship. I'm kidding. But no, but legitimately, CJ, you're not wrong, because that is the level of extremity that I departed what Web3 considers marketing. Does that make sense? Also, if you guys have any concerns about the amount of liquidity or TVL on the DEX, I want you guys to understand that our peak was only ever like between 500 and 600,000 TVL. Does that make sense? So even the idea that you need a Genesis or farm event to increase TVL, I don't even believe in that so much anymore, because one, I think people don't trust them. Two, when we marketed it in the Tomb Fork sense, I think that only made people less enthused about the fucking about the TVL. And on top of that, and I don't mean to really put a huge onus on my performance as a marketer, but I need you guys to understand that historically, you're not wrong about that, Fixer, but believe it or not, I also want to get a lot more users before the meeting range, because the meeting range is also where we start hitting the fucking the resistance. I know you're correct, Fixer, you're correct, and I know that people inside the circus have the same outlook. But I want you to know there's an upside to having space between wherever we are in the meeting range, because that allows more users to buy in without without seeing it bounce on a fucking ceiling. Does that make sense? Yeah. CJ, I don't know if it will. Yeah, arguably, like, it's still 4 times higher than it was when we were building this fucking thing, right? Alessio, you know what? I realize that, like, the reason I'm doing this now is so we can just get to the Vibratile range, and therefore I don't have to keep talking about these hypothetical Epicurean scenarios. Is it Epicurean, CJ, or is it something else? Anyways, yeah. I'm just like, I told this to the devs too, because I'm just saying, hey, we're just gonna drive a whole bunch of people buying Pyre Phantom. By the way, people that have never heard of Phantom before, people that have never heard of Sonic before, people that have never heard of Tomb Forks before, like people who've never heard of Dexes before. Like, that is literally who we're fucking like catering to. Like, we don't need anybody who has a history with Tomb Forks, a history with DeFi, a history with any of the previous projects. Does that make sense? Like, legitimately, I'm going to make it so that we can cast the widest possible net, so that somebody who's buying crypto for the first time and only has a Solana wallet still will, in fact, come to buy $5 of Pyre Phantom. Does that make sense to you guys? Because that user also deserves this, right? Because otherwise, I'm standing by and letting that person get fucked up by scamming meme coins over there on Solana, right? Right? I know you guys don't think of like morality or guilt by inaction or whatever, but that's a paradigm. That's a very difficult paradigm shift. Anyways, you're biomaxing. Well, CJ, it's definitely an influential book to most of philosophy. Anyways, do you guys understand story gap? The idea of it, and when I go on a YouTube interview with the articulation of the public outrage, I'm just gonna keep highlighting and addressing the things that they're frustrated about. And the reason I'm gonna do this is because nobody in crypto talks about this. This is a differentiator. Does that make sense? Like, when do you ever hear somebody actually go, I'm fucking sick of seeing this, and I'm sick of this happening right after, and they actually have a fucking coherent argument about why they even have about why they can even make that judgment? Does that make sense? When I look at like crypto social media, I see a whole bunch of people being very, very fake to each other. Does that make sense? Like, nobody's being completely transparent, and it's like either because they don't know what they're doing, or they do know what they're doing and they're scamming. Does that make sense? Like, this literally becomes like 90% of actors in Web3, right? They don't know what they're doing, or they do know what they're doing, and they're not doing anything good. Does that make sense? So they're always like, it becomes the social norm of like, hey, not only am I going to be opaque about my identity, I'm going to be opaque about my even understanding of the subject matter we're talking about, which blows my fucking mind. Do you guys know what I mean? CJ, I mean, I appreciate your bullishness on what sounds like a sci-fi dystopian future. But anyways, yeah. I for one welcome our new sentient mainframe overlords. But I want you guys to understand. Have you guys heard of a website called Quora? Quora? Has anyone ever heard of this website? Yep. Okay. So on Quora, you ask like any layman level question, like, what is this? Yeah, like, is milk good for you? Right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't really fucking know how to find the answer. Let me ask Quora, which really just becomes a search engine with experts. Does that make sense? The point being is, people who may or may not have a full identity, or even on Reddit, they're incentivized to give as much expertise flexing as possible in the content on that site. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So even if they're not using their real name, and remember, Dr. Mac, do you remember when we were doing the Reddit stuff in September? Right, when you were like, actually, you know, I've been a pulmonologist for fucking decades, and yeah, and they're like, well, anyways, the point being is that you can actually see experts if at least they're not argued with enough. Somebody who's an expert is incentivized to actually show like an extremely transparent level of information around a subject. Do you guys know what I mean? Please tell me I didn't lose anybody. I know that I can get long-winded. Thank you, CJ. Okay, so let's go. Like, they're incentivized to flex their level of comprehension. But on Twitter, you're either competing with the noise or it's like you have to have some type of agenda, right? So even the guys that are like smarter, what the fuck is that guy's name? He's young. Anyways, he's the guy that writes the post that Alessio likes, where it's like 9 posts about kind of like an assessment, like an analysis. I can't remember the fuck his name right now, but anyways, his name might be Max something. I don't fucking know. But again, I'm not even care. Yeah. Yeah, he's like in his mid-20s, I think. Regardless. But he has like 6-figure following. Regardless, yes, Miles Deutscher. Thank you. End name. What a fucking call. Brainwaves. You guys see how powerful my fucking telepathy is right now? That's how hard I'm working. I literally beamed the picture of his face into the producer's head. That's crazy, you guys. Is that not bullish? Which founders do you guys know that have telepathy? Yeah, that guy, right. But the point being is that even if he's giving you like actual comprehension, he's still hooking you to get you to subscribe to his fucking Substack or whatever. Do you guys know what I mean? So it's still like he's giving you the demo version of his analysis regardless. Do you guys know what I mean? So even he has an agenda when he... Okay. Anyways, yeah. CJ, you're not wrong. And that's probably why we need to make the PYRESWAP show not 4 times a week. Make it a development fucking update. I will do it in costume, guys, okay? Next Tuesday, I will be in full bard gear. We'll call it the bardrobe. Okay. I will be in full bardrobe. Ward has that... Oh, okay, fuck it. I'm not going to cry about the pronunciation. But yeah, we'll be in full bardrobing. And I will do it from the easy chair. And it'll be a general update. And maybe I'll provide some screenshots that we can put on this computer. So we can just like, I don't know, fucking show you guys a little bit of screen share. And that'll be the format. Because you guys only care about development, right? There's no point talking about market analysis. Okay, I would say always distrust what people say about like when the cycle is and when the cycle isn't. Because people's expectations of the cycle also affect the cycle. Do you guys know what I mean? Or they affect the present, right? So like if 90% of people think something's going down and they're all wrong, it'll still self-manifest before correcting. And that's what you see on price charts. Does that make sense? Jabri, videos 6, 7, 8, and 9 in Learn Pyre are exactly that. But I'm in full LARP gear. I would even say that yeah, I am a travel ready bard. Yeah, like I could literally start. Actually, I should get a loot. No, I shouldn't. Yeah, we'll just fucking let's just read the fucking book. We won't be a loot bard. We're gonna be a storybook bard. Okay. And the point. Fuck. What am I even talking about? I'm having a good time today, though. I don't know why. I hope you guys are as well. Yeah, I'll do it in the full fucking costume. We'll make it Tuesdays. And we're going to do it in front of the green screen. So I'll, in fact, we'll actually throw this little placeholder set in the meanwhile. So you guys can at least see how it'll look. Oh, and I can use the picture frame for the diagrams. That'll be cool. Okay, maybe. All right. Jerry, how about this? I will learn to play the lute or have an AI twin of mine learn to play the lute, because I can do that, right? Before the end of the year, I should be able to play the lute on a recording, and then later on have that video turn into an AI of me that can actually play the lute, right? Is that not better? I feel like that would be a better leverage point. I can go back to marketing or interviewing or I don't know, designing stuff, right? Okay. Anyways, okay. Good jokes. Anyways, do you guys want to know the bit of lore I was going to leak? Okay. I was going to tell you the name of the story. By the way, this is not recent work, but this is like, I just didn't leak it in the past, but I figured like, fuck it, I should tell them because some people are going to like the knighthood aspect of the game. Obviously. So we have this story with this protagonist named Fergus, right? You guys remember this? Fergus Fenbrook? Right? And he's the fucking wizard protagonist, meaning he's the protagonist that kind of represents like a little bit about the witch players, and it's going to be focused more on like maybe the witchier worldview. Does that make sense? Actually, Frodo Potter, CJ. Frodo Weasley. Yeah, but no. I legitimately, yeah, no. I want you to know, CJ, all of my names are high effort. High fucking effort. But the point being is that there's a knight protagonist too. Because the knight needs his own fucking story. Would you guys agree? And the reason the knight needs a story, no turd Ferguson, his name is Fergus Fenbrook. But if you want to call him that, like I'm fine with that, yeah. But he's not Fergus's son. Anyways, okay. I'm glad you guys are having a good time. Anyways, the knight has to be a protagonist as well, because Fergus has these two stories. One of them is TIFF, which is the investment of Fergus Fenbrook. Does that make sense? I don't know if you guys know this, but there's another story, by the way, that is not completed at all, but is marginally outlined. Really, only the first act is. The reason these stories kind of got fleshed out is because I needed to make the concept chain more concise, but as I was removing concepts, I still kind of had to tuck them into a plot later. Does that make sense to you guys? So I want you guys to understand, like, I'm not just over here, like, I don't know, playing bongo drums and letting my creativity run wild. Like, I'm doing this all out of my factory design brain. Does that make sense? Well done, CJ. I actually know that acronym, and there is always that rolling joke. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's always that rolling joke, right? Somebody had a nickname for her. Fuck. Yeah, hang on, because that's a fantasy fiction author. Hang on. Anyways, okay. There was one joke I saw that used that word turf, and it was in like a pun, and it was just okay. Not my flavor, but I did think it was funny because I try to be objective about comedy. This second story, which does kind of have to show up around, kind of like around the time that we're like getting all 9 forks plugged in. Does that make sense? Like, so around the end of phase 1, we would be probably debuting this. Does that make sense? This is probably a story involved with phase 2, right? Early phase 2 into phase 1. But this is another story because it ends in FF. You know, it's Fergus Fenbrook. And therefore, the protagonist is still going to be a wizard. Does that make sense? At least a type of wizard, right? But there's still a version of the game that has nothing to do with the way that the wizard's plot is kind of unfolding, right? The knight has his own character arc, his own story arc, right? And the knight's story is called THOO. Thu. I don't know if you want to call it that. But it stands for the honor of Oberstrom Osterholt. Or is it Osterholt? Oberstrom Osterholt. Yeah, four O's in his name. And so the protagonist of the Knights, he has to have a different life and backstory than Fergus. Because this is the part where we begin talking about teaching banking concepts. Does that make sense? Because when we really get into like what a bank is and how it works, this does not really get addressed up here. Does that make sense? Here we talk about investing versus gambling and analyzing versus guessing. Does that make sense? And it leads into a very, very Econ 101 chain that is really that is made concise only for fucking what you need to know to understand the tokenomics of PYRESWAP. Does that make sense? We don't do all of Econ 101. We do maybe like 12 things from it. Does that make sense? But the reputation of Fergus Fenbrook, we now talk about things like credit and debt. Does that make sense? Because the whole story is more about anyways, yeah, he becomes an outlaw in this story, and he's kind of on the run because he's been framed for something he didn't do. Does that make sense? So, first of all, that type of story is much more emotive, so it locks people into understanding that the way that you have to kind of fix your reputation is also tied to the way that you can kind of manage credit. Does that make sense? Or credit worthiness, or credit rating. Does that make sense? That's where the whole parallel is, driven by the plot. You guys follow me here as a concept? I really don't know, yeah. And when you guys all stop talking simultaneously, I think that maybe I'm having a seizure. I'm kidding. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you, CJ. All right. Anyways, this story is called The Honor of Oberstrom Osterholt. And this has to be like a completely new protagonist because his has to do, okay, do you guys want to know a little bit about this guy? So Fergus has to have this like John Everyman backstory where he's like, I'm a farmer's son and I grew up barefoot in a village. Does that make sense? And then I worked as an apprenticeship for a guy who lived in a windmill at a different village. Does that make sense? And then he just comes back and he has this very Hallmark Channel family story. Does that make sense? Right? And he's like, yeah. Javery, I mean, that's probably like the way his dad talks to him in his actual backstory, 100%. That is definitely like how his dad's personality would be. But his dad does die. So, Javery, you should know that when you're done learning this story, you will actually believe that he walked uphill both ways. Yeah, because this story is absolutely about walking uphill both ways. Yeah. Anyways. But when we talk about the reputation, this story steers more into like the underlying concepts of credit and debt. Does that make sense? Or like exposure. Does that make sense? Right? Or exposure management. Do you guys know what I mean? And it all has to do with the fact that him and Yatra Dean both have bounties on their heads, but at the same time, they're kind of like repairing the amount of bounties they do have. Does that make sense? To kind of like maintain a baseline of like exactly how wanted they are. Which, by the way, as far as Fergus goes, he's completely innocent. But more on that way fucking later. But the honor of Oberstrom Osterholt, I forget his name because I haven't like thought about this, but this is a guy who was the youngest bastard son of a concubine, right? His mother was a concubine to an older, what is called a fucking count or something. This count became a widower, I guess in his 60s, and he didn't want to remarry because his oldest son was already like of age. Does that make sense? So he's not gonna like split the inheritance with another wife, or rather have a surviving widow. So his son, like he gets a concubine for his old age. Does that make sense? So this guy is, I don't know, he's a fucking count and he's a concubine as an old man. Anyways, he knocks up this concubine 4 times and then he dies of old age. Does that make sense? So there's 4 bastards in the castle. Does that make sense? There's 4 bastards in the castle. Oberstrom is the fucking youngest. Does that make sense? Well, Javery, I think it was like, I think it was done. Do you know the story in the Bible where, I don't know if it's David or Solomon. No, it's David, yeah. When King David is of old age and they need to literally send a girl to like be his bed warmer in order to keep him alive. Anyways, yeah. More on that way fucking later. The point being is, he knocks out this concubine 4 times in like a decade or so. And then he fucking dies. So the point being here is that Oberstrom's mother is like not even 30 years old when she's a widow now. Does that make sense? But the fact of the matter is the castle is now owned by her ex-boyfriend's, or whatever, her keeper's oldest son, who is not really related to her. Does that make sense? He's like not even her stepson, right? But the point being is that since this guy who's in his middle age, his sons enjoy playing with their bastard half-brothers, he's going to let them grow up in the castle, but they're all going to be trained as pages. Does that make sense? And he's not going to take his dad's concubine to be his concubine, but he'll let her live in the castle if she becomes his wife's maidservant. Does that make sense? Have I lost anybody here? So first of all, going from concubine to maidservant is actually a bit of a demotion, but that's not really that relevant. But the point being here is that, so Oberstrom here, also known as Strom or Stromby, he grows up like in page training. Like it's inside a castle. He's very, very low on the totem pole, but it's like a very, very strict and disciplined existence. His mother, when she's no longer a concubine and a maidservant, she's not even raising him anymore, right? Like he's getting raised by like a fucking tutor that looks over all the pages. Does that make sense? Like he now lives in like a little bunkhouse, probably in the stables. Does that make sense? So like it was fun for a while, but like it's like you're just like a royal bastard that is like that's getting pitied. So anyways, his future basically says like, okay, you're not gonna be an inheritor of your dad's estate because you're a bastard. So we can make you a knight though. We can give you like a path to knighthood. So all four of the bastards are on the path to knighthood. Does that make sense? So he's the youngest, and he's got 3 older brothers. Anyways, his older brothers are like 8 years older than him. They're all like maybe a year apart, and then he's like the youngest by like a good gap. So his older brothers, like they become knights first, and he thinks they're so fucking cool, right? Because he's the 4th brother, and he knows it's basically what his future is as well. Anyways, all 3 of his brothers die. And I think in my mind, his 3 brothers that die are also in this story, the ones that arrest Fergus that end up getting killed by the Harmaloct. More on that later. But the point being here is that I'm always going to allude to trios of knights because it's in the GPSC design. If you understand what I'm saying. So knights work in trios, get deployed in trios, possibly die in trios. Does that make sense? Have you guys seen the tokenomic life cycles of the GPSC diagram? Yeah, it's an illusion of that. There you go. Not that trio, but I do appreciate that as well. I've actually meant 2-on, 3-on, Xeon. But yeah, you know what? That also works as a trio. We have trios upon trios here. So yes, the number 3 will be poetically relevant to the knighthood stories. Like any story about a knight, like in any capacity, it'll be like, yeah, it took them 3 tries. Yeah, lightning struck 3 times. There was 3 doors in the hallway. Yeah, I'll beat that to fucking death. Anyways, all of his fucking brothers die. Does that make sense? But he is like the only son left. You're not wrong there. Yeah. Point being is, in between the fact, like after his brothers die, I think his brothers go missing. And I want to say that maybe they go missing because they were butchered by a Harmaloct. So they actually got eaten, right? But when he dies, he actually gets reanimated. Because I'm going to make this an allusion to the fact that we have undead and skeleton knights, also known as the Phantom Opera theme. Make sense to you guys? So this character is in fact a revenant. In the middle of Act 1, I believe he's already a fucking revenant. When he dies from getting run through with a spear in battle. So his brain is still intact, and he gets reanimated very quickly after his death. So since his brain is intact, he has cognitive ability, and he remembers who he is, right? In contrast, skeletons that get reanimated that don't have any fucking organs or whatever, they don't remember their identity at all. Does that make sense? They're basically robots. Does that make sense? So that right there is a little bit of world building. Whatever the state the brain is at the moment of reanimation, that's exactly like how much of their personhood or personality or identity they retain in zombie mode. Does that make sense to you guys? All right, that's just like a geometry conversation. Always a good time, but yeah, I'll keep steering here. Anyways, so whereas Fergus is literally like traveling around the countryside, right? Very Bilbo Baggins style. Fucking this guy, he's the only one when he gets resurrected. He's the only one with his brain intact. So he gets promoted to be a banneret over a regiment of skeleton knights. Does that make sense? He's not really old enough to be a banneret, but like he had good marks. Let's put it that way. Yeah, does that make sense? So he gets promoted to be a banneret, but because all of his fucking soldiers are goddamn skeletons, it's unnerving to the populace. Does that make sense? So they all get stationed at a keep that's kind of remote. Does that make sense? So he's overseeing this kind of like forward place fort, right? It's entirely staffed with fucking skeletons because they're not really, living people are kind of spooked out by these fucking animated corpses. Does that make sense? Anyways, because he oversees this remote stronghold, there's like a few villages in his like jurisdiction. Does that make sense? So if any of those villages have a problem, they would literally send a fucking messenger to the keep to like go request the knighthood's help. Does that make sense to y'all? So the point being is that in his fucking keep, which he oversees, there is this vault. There is a vault. This vault has a proper name, and I want to say it's the Depositorium of Deferred Determination and Discernment, which is like this very bureaucratic name. It's the quadruple D, if you will. And it's literally about like, if you understand that the economy of this world is like very of this country is very like comedically bureaucratic concerning the regulation of magic. This is like this vault that ends up being like this miscellaneous evidence logger concerning anything that happens in the region. Does that make sense? It's like, do you guys get what I'm saying? So as part of his job, exactly, Jeffrey, but not just like reports. It's not an intelligence vault. It's more like a inventory. Does that make sense? You could think of it like a gigantic lost and found for like magical or dangerous items. Does that make sense? Or anything that is like in a indeterminate status, right? Which is like some whatever. I haven't fucking cemented in a lot of this vocabulary. Yeah. Oh no, it's called the Depositorium of Deferred Determination and Discernment. Yeah, that is meant to be its kind of like poetically bureaucratic, ridiculous name. Well, anyways, yeah. The point being is, this guy's personality is all about being an absolute Boy Scout. Does that make sense? There's a poeticness to the fact that he's very, very rigid in his movements. He's rigid because all the blood in his body is coagulated. Does that make sense? All the blood in his body is coagulated, so he's always kind of like stiff whenever he's beginning moving, right? Because he's a fucking revenant. But the fact of the matter is that in order for him to do his job of being a banneret and helping the villages, he ends up in this gray area, which is also poetically in the theme because as he becomes a revenant, his hair turns gray. I'm sorry. Yeah. This is, again, these protagonists are not low effort at all, by the way. The point being is that his journey about changing the way he thinks about this vault is the plot line of teaching banking. Does that make sense? Do you guys get it? Because obviously there's going to be valuable shit in the fucking vault too. Does that make sense? It's not always going to be like coins or whatever. Does that make sense? But it works around the fact that his keep, as a banneret, he has jurisdiction over the whole keep, right? But the fucking vault that's in his keep is technically superseded by the bureau that's at the capital. That's at the capital city. Do y'all understand what I just said right there? So this ends up in this legalistic gray area concerning the jurisdiction of that vault, right? The guy who comes to inspect the vault doesn't respect the rules like he does. This is going to be like one of these guys who's always like snacking. Does that make sense? So for an example of a plot point, it's not allowed to be eating or drinking when you're in the vault. But whenever this guy goes in, he's like, all right, I'm going to take some cookies and like snack while I do the inspection. And this guy's excuse is like, I've been doing this job longer than that rules existed. So therefore, he has seniority to that law, right? Jeffrey, I have no idea. I don't think there's any gold in Fort Knox. I can't believe they're even fucking making that a narrative. Are they talking about that? I have not believed that there's gold in Fort Knox for a while. I was researching I was writing a banking documentary in 2023, like a history of banking. I don't believe there's any gold there. Sorry, I don't know. Like, yeah. I looked into that a lot in 2023. Okay, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some, but like legitimately, there's also a gold reserve in New York City, like way fucking low. Do you guys know about this? It's like, I don't know, 10 floors down or some shit. It's beneath the subway and it's like armored as fuck. It's like nuclear weapon proof. Yeah. I think that might have gold. Yeah. Mr. Producer knows about it. Anyways, okay. Wrapping up this fucking protagonist. So this protagonist, he's ending up being split mentally between like, I need to help these villagers who have their village getting raided, but in order to help them, I need to borrow resources from the vault. Does that make sense? So the fact that the inspector kind of has this like a little bit looser interpretation of the rules, that gets him to be a little bit less rigid, wink wink, a little bit more flexible with how he understands his duties of stewardship. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? Right? Because the auditor, the inspector is like, listen, we don't have the manpower to audit whether things are necessarily leaving and going all the time. Does that make sense? We only look at like whether what we find in the vault matches what's on the fucking, what's that thing called? A manifest or inventory? I don't fucking know. Yeah, some sort of paper, right? So therefore, like, he's put in this position where he's like, I'm going to fail my duty as a banneret, or I can become a banker. Does that make sense? You can call it ledger, I guess. Yeah, why not? But yeah, I'm avoiding the use of the word ledger in the lore only because it's so goddamn masturbatory inside Web3. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like we talk about it as like a record, a scroll, a fucking, a rubric, yeah, a manifest, yeah, a rubric. Anyways, yeah, we're not going to say ledger because there's a company called Ledger, you know what I mean? Naming in Web3 sucks, but more on that way later. But, anyways, the point being is, it's like in order for him to actually fulfill his job of saving a fucking village from raiders that are burning it to the ground, he has to borrow something from the fucking vault. He knows that he can go to town and buy the stuff that he's borrowing from the vault and replace it before the next inspection. Does that make sense? Anyways, yeah. So this is okay, you know, I'm spoiling the fucking story at this point. Anyways, that's enough lore leakage. This story is not going to be written until, I don't know, probably like 11 years from now. I'm kidding, you guys, I'm kidding. But the point of it is, once this first story is kind of like done, that's the longest story ever. Does that make sense? Because this story, in order to write it, required so much additional world building. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, I had to really think about, like, the fact that I'm not just writing one book. I now have to write a goddamn fantasy fiction series. Right, Jay-Reed, because I have to literally create the setting. And also what this means, Jay-Reed, is that after you have experienced the first story, I also, on my end, I now have like a curriculum check of what you should already know. Does that make sense? I want you guys to understand something. The reason we're doing Learn Pyre is because I don't know what people don't know. But if I'm able to literally create that minimum viable level of knowledge inside Learn Pyre, I'd be like, go to Learn Pyre and then I'll talk to you. Oh, great question, Alessio. I think I'm calling it this. And by the way, this is also related to why I don't use the word ledger. But I think it's called the accounts and records of Lagriona. And this is a way that it's you'll notice that I beat double entendres and triple entendres to death. And the whole point of it is, and you can think of this as TAROL as the fucking, if you want an acronym, TAROL. But the point of it is, this is a double entendre with the fact that a lot of it is actually economics, finance, and banking related. But we're also telling stories. Make sense? You guys get it? Listen, I can only fill so much cleverness inside a single name, okay? Like, there's just I'm over here clever maxing as hard as I can. And I hope you guys appreciate that, all right? And I really do mean I'm clever maxing, okay? Act 1 of Oberstrom's story is called Upward Mobility because he's getting reanimated as a corpse while also getting promoted. And also he loses mobility. Yeah, like I really am clever maxing. I want you guys to know that I'm jamming maximum cleverness inside the names of things, okay? Oh, when he becomes a zombie banker, that act is called Dead Man's Curve because he's in a risky area, but it's also now he's a zombie banker. Clever maxing. I'm serious, I'm clever maxing. You guys have never seen cleverness so maxed. Yeah. Thank you, Alessio. Yeah, I appreciate you at least. I appreciate you making your requirements clear. Anyways, we'll see you guys on Tuesday. I'll probably write a small announcement about it. And have a great rest of your day. Bye.